So, I will continue the event right now if everybody wants to have a seat. Thank you very much. So as 2016 wore on, my videos really started picking up steam. It was the first time where I was healthy, and this was my primary source of work, filming political events in the area. So I actually posted about 450 videos through the first half of 2016. I was covering tons of events. By that point, I had over 1,000 videos total. Now, some of these protesters don't like my brand of journalism because I show what actually happens at these protests. You know, when they're assaulting bystanders, when they're smashing windows, when they're calling for shooting police officers. I'm there filming it, and I'm posting it up on YouTube, and a lot of times raw, continuous footage. So I know a lot of these people don't like me, but it's my right to be there, you know, and I post these videos with minimal narration. You know, again, I like to put the viewer right in the middle of the story. So I was a CHL holder, concealed handgun license holder, since 2011. I'd been through numerous firearms trainings over the years, including some taught by DPSST certified instructors. Those are the people who train and certify the police. There's some of them that in their off time, they do civilian-based courses where they take a lot of those standards and apply them to the civilian world. And I've been through some of those courses. I've been to hundreds of political events, dozens of protests. I was trained to carry everywhere. Make it habitual, because you never know when danger may arise. You know, trouble doesn't announce itself an hour beforehand. If it did, then that gives you time to get away from it. So that's why I was carrying on this night, because I was trained to carry everywhere. I'm sure that there's a few people in the crowd here who have been through similar courses. It's what you're trained to do. So I will now show the video. So this is my first-person video right here from my camera. This is Nate Millsap's video. He's the large guy right there. He is standing on the ledge of the Justice Center. This is right downtown here, about 5 or 10 blocks away at the Justice Center. They're speaking on the steps of the Justice Center. That's also the police headquarters and the county jail and some of the courtrooms. So this is Millsap's video. These two are surveillance videos from the Hatfield Courthouse right across the street. This is looking southbound down 3rd. This one is sort of looking at an angle. This is Main Street right here. So this is looking at an angle towards the corner of Main Street and 3rd. You notice these guys right here. And you might recognize that guy right there because he's sitting there, but I do not consider him part of the violent mob because he and I have a decent rapport. So these guys are actually gathering up. They're huddling up. And if we scroll back a little bit in the video, you can see they actually started right up there. So they're huddling up. They see me in the crowd. They don't like me for whatever reason. And they huddle up to formulate their plan to come and attack me. So you can see them now coming down the steps. So even the guy running the camera at the Hatfield building, the security officer on duty that night, he saw those guys and said, those guys mean trouble. So he zoomed in the camera on them to see what's going on. Now this guy right here, his name is Benjamin Carenza. He is a very large individual. He literally weighs 400 pounds. He is literally twice my size. He has a very lengthy criminal history. He's been in and out of federal prison 3 times. He's been in and out of county jails on multiple occasions on a variety of different crimes. He's attacked other journalists in the street. He tried to get the mob to attack Millsap at an event one time, but being 6'6" and 280 pounds like Millsap is, that sort of deterred them. Plus there was a row of cops about 20 feet away. That's one thing that you'll notice missing from all of this. No police officers. You have hundreds of people marching through the streets, not a single uniformed officer to be seen. Now that's actually contrary to the Portland Police Bureau's own directives when it comes to protests that say we need to have a visible presence to prevent crimes from happening, prevent assaults, prevent violence. No police anywhere to be seen. Yeah, usually it starts off with a couple rows of bicycle cops. They're not rushing in to make an arrest. They're just kind of on the sides, the outskirts of things, keeping an eye on stuff. They'll try to get ahead of the march, and they'll try to redirect traffic around. None of that on this particular night. Benjamin Carenza here is also accused of harassing homeless folks. He had to be held back one time by other activists outside of the ACLU bus stop because he was trying to physically attack Mary Eng, who's a police accountability activist. He had to be held back by several activists because he was getting ready to lunge at her. So he's a very dangerous individual with a very lengthy criminal history. He's also a suspected snitch and informant because a lot of people realize that he goes to these protests, he causes trouble, but when the police run in, he's all of a sudden nowhere to be seen. He runs to the back. And you can see that in Nate Millsap's video from when Carenza tried to get the mob to attack him. He gets the mob riled up and then he runs off into the back. So when the police show up to arrest people, Carenza's nowhere to be seen. Carenza's also suspected of being involved in this Officer Naya Joey Gibson email exchange, text messaging thing. Because in some of those emails released, there's an email address in there, eyeofprovidence@riseup.net. And there's some people that are claiming that is Benjamin Carenza's email address. Not only is he providing the police information about the Patriot Prayer guys, whacked out false information, claiming all sorts of ridiculous things about roving armed militias. He's trying to implicate Millsap in organizing armed militias to go and encircle these protests. What? But strangely enough, in these emails to Naya, that same email address also provides information to the police about the anarchists and Antifa and the leftist people. Their real names, their fake names, the names they go by on Facebook. He's providing all of that information to the police, along with the tactics that he thinks that they're going to do. So he's suspected to be a snitch and informant who's playing it on both sides. I'll play the video a little bit more here. So now they're coming in to get me. Do those guys look like they're coming in to have a cup of tea, or do they look like they mean business? So around that point, I catch them out of the corner of my eye. And I zoom my lens out because I want as wide a view as possible, because I see them coming straight for me. You know, it's kind of crowded. You know, I can't really try to maneuver away. There's actually a woman with a baby right next to the side of me here. So I wasn't going to try to shove her out of the way to try to get out of there. So they're making a beeline straight for me, and I happen to catch them out of the corner of my eye. And so that's when I zoom my camera out. So Benjamin Carenza is leading this group of people. They have their anarchist flag sticks with them, which I've personally seen used as weapons to smash out windows. Benjamin Carenza is now starting to encircle me from behind. Literally weighs twice my size. So he starts pushing and shoving me, and you can hear me immediately say, "Don't put your hands on me, don't put your hands on me." You know, so I start retreating from the scene. I start backing away. Obviously, these guys mean business. They mean trouble. I'm outnumbered. I'm not there to fight or cause any trouble with these people. I'm just there to film. I'm trying to do my job as a video news journalist. So they are now taking steps towards me as I'm trying to back away from the scene. Not only have they intentionally targeted me and encircled me and started to get physically assaultive with me, they are now taking steps towards me as I'm trying to avoid the situation. And you can see now everyone's realized it's a scene. Everyone's starting to look over at what's going on here. Millsap pans his camera around here in a second. So at that point, I'm backing away. They're taking steps towards me. I had flipped my monopod upside down. Monopod is just a single stick that you would have a camera on, almost like a cane that would have the camera on top, and it's collapsible. You can do it up and down, different varying lengths. That's great to have at protests out on the street because your angles or your footage is more stable, and you can get it up above crowds, and you can get it stable if you're capturing people speaking, and it's maneuverable too. You can easily walk with it. So all the street videographers I always encourage to get monopods. Thank you, Kay. So I'd flip my monopod upside down to use that as sort of a non-lethal intermediary option here. In case they're going to hit me with their flagstaffs, in case they're going to start punching me or something, I would at least have something at that point. Now, they're still taking steps towards me after I did that, after I gave the verbal commands, as I'm still giving the verbal commands, and as I'm backing away. So at that point, I flipped my jacket open to reveal that I had a gun. Now, I was ready to possibly draw at that point. It would depend on the situation exactly, but I wanted to be ready to be able to draw. Because at that point, the threat level has been escalated towards me now that they're taking steps towards me. And please chime in if the people who have been through DPSST disagree with anything that I'm saying. So now it's turning into a bit more of a scene, because now after these guys incited the scene and I'm trying to get away and I'm forced to possibly draw my gun at that point, now everybody's screaming and yelling, oh, he's got a gun, he's got a gun.
But even knowingly, they still converge.
Yes, so they're still coming after me. You're going to notice, I might have to back this up a little bit more, you'll notice in this angle here a bunch of people coming off of the ledge. I'll back it up just a little bit here. Look at all these people jumping off the ledge to come join into the scene. So it's a very chaotic scene, very dynamic. People are coming in and out of the scene. People are coming in and out from all different angles. I'm trying to get away from the scene. I don't want to fight. I don't want to become a victim of violence. I don't want to have to go to that next level to defend myself. I will if I have to. I don't want to have to go there, though. So you got all these other people getting up in my grill here. You'll notice that Carenza here had separated himself from the crowd. So he gets the crowd all riled up, then he separates himself from the crowd. So that's Carenza there. That's the bulk of the mob. And then Mike Bivens, another street videographer, he had fired up his camera right there. As far as I know, that was when he started it. There's no footage before that. My angle is the only one that has the initial attack on it. So now, watch this dude. He's shedding his backpack at that point. That sort of escalates your level of fear. Because now, he's shedding he's making it easier for him to attack me if he's not weighed down by his backpack. You'll notice I am weighed down by my backpack. I have my computer gear in there. I have other camera gear, spare batteries, water, snacks. Anyone that's been through my video training series on street videography, which I know a couple folks in here have.
At the Learning Annex next week, is it?
Huh?
At the Learning Annex, is it?
No, it's on YouTube. It's part of my Videographer Academy. So I have all that stuff in my backpack, so I'm weighed down by my backpack here. So this other guy is now encircling me from behind. This guy is actually Demetrius. Is he still in here?
Hi. Me?
Oh yeah, there he is.
Hi.
This is your friend Malcolm Chaddock right here, who tried to start an altercation with Demetrius at an event one time, getting in Demetrius's face, screaming and yelling at him. I have seen him at several things, blocking off traffic illegally. I've seen him here at PSU when students have crashed the Board of Trustees meeting. I've seen him getting in the way of PSU employees in the hallways, being asked to leave. He claims to be some kind of security guard, is what he claims to be. He's got no DPSST certification. He is just an arbitrary thing. So he's now circling around my back. I got all this other stuff going on, sensory overload at this point. Because I like to be very aware of the situation, high situational awareness. And so my eyes are constantly scanning the horizontal plane as all of this is going on. So now this guy's coming up behind me here. I got all these people. Now I got to deal with this guy. What's this guy all about? He starts walking towards me after encircling me from behind. He's now coming up from my 4 or 5 o'clock position with his arms outstretched towards me. The bulk of the mob is now to my right. So I happen to notice here, and this is almost the decisive moment here, because my attention is distracted to my right here, and I happen to see Carenza now coming up on what is my blind side, my left side. My attention is distracted here, but because I have a decent sense of awareness, I happen to catch him out of the corner of my eye. At that point, having been through everything that I've been through in this 40-second span, as I'm trying to get away from the altercation, with these people continuing to bear down on me, after I've issued verbal commands, after I've started retreating, after I've tried using a non-lethal device, they're still coming after me. He's not coming up on my blind side. A guy who's literally twice my size, now coming up on my blind side. At that point, I had every reason to believe that these guys, in a mob mentality, were just seconds away from smashing me into the pavement, robbing me of my camera gear, robbing me of my computer gear, possibly using my gun against me. No police around to protect me. I'm left to fend for myself at that point. So this was the decisive moment where I feel that I was in danger and that having exercised all of these other options to no avail, I'm left with no choice. So,
whose video is that second one right there?
Which one? This one?
No, up top.
This one?
Top middle.
Top middle.
Top middle? Bivens.
Bivens?
Mike Bivens, so the activists are familiar with Mike Bivens. He's a videographer. He's sort of an Antifa apologist. He'll delete videos that show Antifa committing crimes. He'll make copyright complaints if you're trying to borrow some of his videos for something else. So he's really sort of a... He accidentally becomes a journalist, but it's not intentional. So, so that's his angle right there. So I'm thankful that everybody stopped and or got back when I drew. I was trained to shoot until the threat has been neutralized. Again, people who have been through firearms training, DPSST training, are going to be familiar with that. So in this particular case, the act of me drawing the firearm and leveling it at what I believe to be hostile and threatening subjects was enough to neutralize that threat, because they all stopped, they all got back. I did not have to fire any rounds at that point. Having neutralized the threats and everybody safely away from me, the threat is now gone, and I reholster, just as I was trained to do. So it started to get a little hairier again. People were coming up on me again, but it didn't reach that level of So this is the Mike Bluehair video. I'm sure several of you are familiar with Mike Bluehair. He's a very well-known street videographer. He likes to film the police and whatnot. So he was there, and he got some of this. But what's interesting here is, let me get to this part here. So this was after I had drawn the gun and I'm backing away. Dude! You'll notice this guy here. This is a Black Panther guy. I personally know that. His name is Jelani Sharif. He comes up to further harass and accost me. Just 30 minutes prior to this, he was the one in Pioneer Square who was calling for people to shoot police officers. Straight up. Saying if you see police doing whatever, you got to pop them. Pull out your gun and pop them, is what he's saying. And then later on in his speech, he's saying that if you see the police interacting with someone, doing whatever, if you don't get in there and interfere with them, you're going to have trouble with him. You're going to have trouble with me if you don't go and assault police officers. So this guy now comes up to get in my face, giving me trouble.
Look! We got people holding people away from you! Let him leave, dude! Look! Let him leave!
So So now this guy in the gray hoodie, his name is
George Lackas.
George Lackas. He comes up.
Dude, he just wants to leave. Let him leave. He's good. I'm not turning my camera off. I'm good. Dude!
So this guy comes up in the middle of all that, shoves me from behind. Then I immediately, again, using my non-lethal option, because I don't feel that that right there is a life-threatening circumstance. It is a threatening circumstance of some sort, but not life-threatening. So, non-lethal intermediary object right there, used to deter him from further doing that, or to protect myself if he continues to do that. What's interesting is the undercover officer who watched all of this happen and refused to intervene, Brandon Combs, he's with the undercover drug vice team. He writes in his report, Strickland started making a jabbing motion with his monopod at an unknown subject. What he leaves out is the fact that this subject, who's been arrested several times, is not unknown to the police, had come up to behind me and shoved me. He leaves that out of his report. So everything that I did throughout this entire thing was a reaction to what other people were doing to me. You know, again, I wasn't there to start trouble. I wasn't there to cause fights. I was there to film. Had they not made the conscious and deliberate decision to pick a fight with someone, some of whom knew I had a gun, then none of this would have happened. I'm thankful that everybody stopped and or got back when I drew and issued those further verbal commands to do that. I mean, I can't imagine if a couple folks would have started running up on me at that point. You know, I could not go to the low ready position, which is this. Sometimes you'll see police officers or people doing this. When you have multiple people coming at you from multiple different angles, and you do this, all it takes is one guy coming up from behind you, wrapping his arms around you, now your arm is neutralized and you can't level your gun. So I could not go to the low ready at that point. So I followed my training throughout this. And I did what I believe a police officer would do in that. It's a simple concept. If you don't want someone to pull a gun on you, don't start fights with people in the street. What the heck do you think is going to happen? So Carranza was all too willing to talk to the police. The police finally show up. They jump off their paddy wagon with their guns out. I follow their commands. They yell at me to get on the ground. I follow their commands because I don't want any trouble with them. You know, that's just plain stupid. So they didn't care what I had to say. I'm trying to explain, yeah, these guys surrounded me, they were attacking me, I was trying to get away, I acted in self-defense. They didn't care anything about what I had to say. I said it's all on video, you can look at the video on my camera. They didn't care. Didn't want to look at the camera. So one of the officers there, they formed a line with a number of riot cops as they were taking me into custody. And there were a number of people who were still kind of in trail, including Carranza, who's still in tow on all of this. This officer says, instead of saying, who saw what happened? Are there any witnesses? Anybody tell me anything? No, he's not saying that. He says, who was menaced by him? Were you targeted by him? He points directly at blue hair. Says, were you targeted by him? It's not who saw what happened. It's not trying to gather evidence. It's who was targeted. So I was in custody for 4 hours before they knew what to charge me with. I'm getting transferred around between cruisers, paddy wagons, finally into a holding cell for an hour and a half before they even knew what to charge me with. So initially they charged me with 1 count of menacing and 1 count of disorderly conduct. I finally got released from jail on recognizance at, I believe, 4:24 a.m. with orders to show back up at 2 p.m. for the arraignment. I need a bit of water here. So I show up at the arraignment. By that point, people had already started raising legal funds for me. So by that point, we already had lawyers. And so we get there, 2 p.m. Kate Molina is the deputy district attorney who's doing the arraignments that day. She informs us she's now upping this to felony charges of unlawful use of a weapon. And we get in front of the judge, and she pulls out this phony police report that I didn't even know existed, filed by a guy named John Slaughter. Now, it turns out he and I had actually been to several events at the same time in the past, but my only real interaction that I can recall with him was at the vigil for the Orlando shooting victims, which was about a month before this. I think it was June 12th. This all happened on July 7th, 2016. So June 12th, about 3 or 4 weeks before this, I was there filming the Orlando nightclub vigil. You know, again, I'm not there to cause trouble. I'm not there to mock anyone. You know, it's an absolute tragedy what happened down there in Orlando. Some of you guys might remember that's when, I guess, was a radical Islam guy. Had busted into the gay nightclub in Orlando and started shooting people. Absolutely horrific. You know, I'm certainly not going to go to something like that and mock people or make fun of people. You know, my objective on that evening was to put together a package from the thing, because it was a huge crowd at that Orlando vigil, and shop it to the news networks, see if anyone wanted to buy it. So John Slaughter and a bunch of other people decided to get in my face, scream and yell at me at this thing. I did not feel that my life was in danger at that point. It did not escalate to the level of what happened at this. Also, there's a row of police right there. So there were some people giving me guff, John Slaughter being one of them. Screaming into my camera, screaming his phone number into my camera, telling people to call him. Screaming his phone number, saying that he's the basketball coach at Portland Community College. So I did end up selling that video to vidmax.com. So I show up to the arraignment. This guy had filed a police report, John Slaughter, claiming that I was sending him threatening race-based text messages, voicemails, and that I had driven by his house one night with my hand in the shape of a gun pointing towards him. I barely know who this guy is. I didn't care who this guy was at that point. I'm not going to go out of my way to do that. I don't do that sort of thing. I was a news videographer. You know? So he's also claiming in this police report, complete conjecture, that I have ties to all these white supremacist groups. He calls me a white nationalist anarchist in this police report. So Kate Molina is reading this out loud in front of the judge. She's reading it as fact, with TV cameras rolling, capturing the audio. I'd never even heard of this police report. I was never asked about it. They never asked me anything about it. So I'm looking at my attorney going, what is she talking about? So the district attorney uses that as justification to up this to felonies and put a $250,000 bail on me and throw me into jail. And then news is broadcasting, oh, violent white supremacist guy who pulled a gun on protesters. Because my video angle is the only one that shows the initial attack. That was immediately seized by police. I couldn't get that out. So the only thing the news showed was the 7 seconds I had the gun out. They didn't include, oh, the video news journalist who had a mob of people coming after him. No, they didn't include that. Just like with Billy Wilson up in Vancouver. They don't say that his truck was surrounded, people were throwing rocks at him. They just say the guy who drove through protesters in Vancouver. You wonder why I have to take to my own media? Stuff like that is why. I have never been sued for defamation in the media that I've done. I've never been given a cease and desist. I've never been forced to do any retractions, because everything I've ever posted has been true. I don't have to flip things around like what mainstream does. So, she brings up this John Slaughter report. They toss me into real jail at that point. But for Kate Molina to sit up there and call me a racist, how many black folks have I tossed into prison? The answer to that would be 0. How many black folks is Kate Molina, prosecutor from Multnomah County? How many black folks has she tossed into prison? Hundreds? Thousands? It's her job to do that on a daily basis. And she has the gall to call me a racist? Where was she when members of the community, namely LGBT community, were out front of the Rose Garden and the Convention Center, fending off the Westboro Baptist Church? I was there. Where was Kate Molina? How can she claim that I'm racist and that I have some sort of hatred of LGBTQ people when I'm out there doing that sort of thing? Her mother should be disgusted with her for the act that she pulled on me. She's lying to the judge, pulling out this false police report, making all these accusations. Her father was actually a district attorney. I'm doing some investigating on him that I'm keeping in my dead man switch vault. So they tossed me into jail. There's national outrage that I'm thankful for. Let's see if I can just turn this off here. Oregon Firearms Federation were raising funds for me. I'm very thankful for that. You know, I couldn't tell my own story. You know, there were bloggers getting the story out. You know, people donating to the defense fund. But media couldn't wait to hang me with all this false stuff about me, because I was out scooping media all through 2016. I was at some of the same events they were at. They decided to not run the story. I'd run the video, it'd get hundreds of thousands of views. I'm out scooping them on everything through 2016. So in jail, I was in a good behavior wing. I met some folks who aren't necessarily bad people, but they just got caught up in things that you shouldn't get caught up in. I'm not making excuses, but at least it explains some things. And I did gain a whole new vision on, you know, the justice system and things like that. And I think I have a lot in common with the Black Lives Matter movement, based a lot on things that I learned in jail, you know? So thankfully I was able to get bailed out, thanks to Oregon Firearms Federation, Lars Larson, Victoria Taft, countless other people. So I'm then on pretrial release after I get bailed out, after 11 days in jail. I am ordered by a pretrial release officer, Chelsea Fanua. I am banned from blogging. I am banned from posting videos. This is my job, by the way. She's banned me from working. I'm banned from speaking to the media. I'm banned from going on Twitter. I'm banned from going to political events. I can't tell my own story. If I were to do any of those things, I'd be tossed into jail again and lose all the bail money. Has anyone ever heard anything like that? Someone having those kinds of restrictions on them?
Yeah.
So in the indictment on me, it lists only vague descriptions of these people. On July 7th, 2016, Strickland intentionally menaced a man with a blue backpack and black pants. No names, just vague descriptions. Now, I've looked through 100 indictments since then at various different things. Mine is the only indictment that I've ever seen that does not list names. Just vague descriptions. Not even Karenza and Chaddock are named in this thing, who were later identified. So the judge ordered that the evidence be sealed. My video, my first-person video, which is the only one that shows the attack, sealed evidence, public can't see it. The Hatfield surveillance videos that shows the mob gathering up, formulating their plan, sealed evidence, public can't see it. In the interviews with detectives, Layla Forbes, who I guess is a former student now, she's saying all this crazy stuff to the detectives, saying that I had the gun out for a whole minute, saying that I've showed up to events here at PSU to cause trouble. They spent half an hour talking about that. He's basically lying to the judge about all these different things. So when it comes time, when we're getting up to the trial, the judge approved nearly every motion from the prosecution and denied nearly every motion from us. We motioned for change of venue based on a tainted jury because of the infactual, inflammatory, untrue, defamatory things that were out in the media that were perpetrated by the district attorneys themselves. Judge denied that, said that doesn't taint the jury pool. Inadmissible was what happened to me 16 months prior to this. I personally had 2 video cameras stolen from me and I was body slammed on the pavement. My arm broken in multiple positions, needing multiple surgeries, going through months of physical rehab, and being decked out on oxycodones. I personally had experienced what I thought was about to happen again. Judge ruled that's inadmissible. Does not play into one's mindset, does not play into one's ability to defend themselves, being partially disabled. I don't have full use of my left arm. Yeah, I look all right when I'm walking down the street, no one can really tell. I don't have much strength in the arm, I can't lift much, I can't punch people or wrestle my way out of things. My statements to the detectives were ruled to be inadmissible. Because I told the detectives everything that happened through my point of view, how I was in fear. That was ruled to be inadmissible. The Portland police directives that state that they should have a visible presence at these protests, ruled to be inadmissible. We also wanted the state to cite which part of unlawful use of a weapon they were charging me with, because that has multiple different definitions. They refused to do that. Judge agreed with the prosecution. So he basically didn't allow any of the evidence that would suggest what my mindset was at the time. Because self-defense lies solely in the mind of the person raising self-defense. Not in the mindset of somebody else observing, not in the mindset of someone doing the aggressive acts that the person has to defend themselves against. That's the case State versus Oliphant and Kenneth Wood. If you guys are not familiar with that case, you three need to get familiar with that case. That was a landmark case that redefined self-defense in the state. It was a guy, Kenneth Wood, was charged with assaulting a police officer and resisting arrest. But he reasonably believed that the police officers were using unlawful force against him because it was beyond the minimal force necessary to bring him into custody. The state Supreme Court eventually ruled with Kenneth Wood, saying that, yeah, he did have reason to believe that the officers were using unlawful force against him. He acted in self-defense against the officers. And it's not what the officers intended to do to him, it's what he perceived what the officers were doing to him. Just like me, it doesn't matter what Carenza's intents were. It doesn't matter. I'll take questions at the end, thank you. It doesn't matter what the other people involved, it doesn't matter what their intent was or what they're saying their intent was. It's what I believe their intent to be. So if I haven't made it clear, my actions were solely in self-defense throughout this whole thing. So of course, when it comes time for the jury to come in, the whole jury's tainted. Everybody's heard about the story. Everybody's heard the things Kate Molina said in the news. Everybody's heard all this untrue stuff that everybody said about me. Some of the people in the jury were at the protest. Some of the people... Yeah.
Really?
Some of the people have been to other protests I've filmed. Now, one of the things...
Allowed them?
Well, I'll get to that. So one of the things that I focused a lot of my journalism on was Second Amendment related stuff. I like to film what the anti-gun people were saying and doing. One of those organizations is called Ceasefire Oregon. I had filmed several of their events. I had actually found other videos of their director, Penny Okamoto, saying all sorts of crazy things. Longtime fans of my channel know who Penny Okamoto is. She's the babbling blonde idiot. So that was one of the groups that I focused a lot on. One of the people on the jury is a volunteer for Ceasefire Oregon who's known about me for years. So all of our fears about a tainted jury came to fruition. So John Slaughter is one of the witnesses to this. He was on the steps here. So he gets on the witness stand. At first he's saying that I was open carrying. He was telling the detectives that I was click-clacking my gun throughout the protest, pulling it out, unloading it, reloading it during the march. What? No, I loaded my gun at home. And then he's saying, well, I didn't know. I didn't see him. He was concealed carrying. First you're saying I'm open carrying, then you're saying I'm concealed carrying, then he admits that he didn't actually see any of this. He's just going off of third-hand knowledge from what he heard other people saying. He said this both to the detectives and on the witness stand. Previously, right along the time that Jelani Sharif was calling for shooting police officers, John Slaughter, at that same thing, right at the same thing, was calling for people to carry guns at work. I have that as a video on my channel. He's saying, if you work a job where you're not allowed to have a gun, you're not allowed to carry it at your work, you need to quit your job. Thank you. You're supporting my work. Thank you. You're justifying my actions. John Slaughter admits to taking part in the plan to confront me. Forcibly remove me was the language that he used in the interview with the detective. He said that there was a text message conversation going on between him and a whole bunch of other people about how they were going to come and confront me and forcibly remove me from the area. He's on the witness stand saying that some of the people who were involved in this attack on me were armed with guns themselves. They're ex-military, they're martial arts people. Carenza's on the witness stand, the big dude. He's admitting to conspire against me. He's saying, oh yeah, several individuals approached me, they informed me Strickland was in the crowd, and so we went in to get him. You have these people admitting on the witness stand that they planned all of this out to come and physically confront me.
Physically remove you, wasn't it?
Physically remove me, physically confront me. Now, I consider Benjamin Carenz's actions against me to meet the statutory definition of coercion, which is using force or intimidation to prevent someone from engaging in an activity that they have a lawful right to engage in. I'm exercising my First Amendment rights. He's using force and threats to prevent me from doing such. Because he's doing this with 5 or more people, I believe this meets the statutory definition of riot, which is when you're engaging with 5 or more people in a deliberate act to cause panic and alarm to the public. Along with harassment, assault, disorderly conduct, menacing. If that were a police officer there and Carenza did that, would that be considered assaulting an officer?
Yeah.
The standard is the same, it's just the level of crime changes. So Todd Jackson, the other district attorney who's working on the case, he's defending the notion of protesters wearing masks while they're engaging in physical assaults on people. He's saying, no, it's not to appear threatening, it's not to appear menacing, it's not to conceal your identity so you don't get caught. It's for personal protection. To prevent against stalking and harassment should members of the public or certain journalists learn of your identity. So if someone's out there if they're holding up the liquor store and they got a mask over their face, do they get to go into court and say, oh, it wasn't because I wanted to hide my identity or to scare the guy behind the counter. It was because I didn't want anybody to harass me afterwards. That's what the prosecutors are arguing about.
No, we have a half an hour extension.
Half an hour, thank you very much. And it looks like Randy's leaving. Okay, thank you. You've kept up with a lot of, you know everything I'm saying anyways.
I do.
So, so we thought we were winning this case because we had these guys on the stand admitting that they planned this coordinated attack on me. We have all the video evidence of them doing it. We have the video evidence of me exercising my diligence to get away from the scene. We thought we were winning the case. So we bring up, so the way the trial works is they give your opening arguments, the prosecution brings up all their witnesses, makes their case, the case in chief as it is called, and then they rest, and then we present our case. We only brought up a couple witnesses, a couple of which are in this room. I will leave out names for right now. One of the witnesses we brought up that they knew we were going to bring up is a use of force expert. He's the former firearms trainer for the Gresham Police Department. He also trains civilians. Of course, he concludes that everything I did was correct, in line with self-defense, in line with CHL holders are trained to do, that I acted appropriately and reasonable under those circumstances. So then we rest our case. And then the prosecutors say, oh, wait, we want to bring up one more guy. Well, wait a minute here. You already made your case. You already brought up all your witnesses. You already rested. They want to bring up their own use of force expert now. They had plenty of opportunities to do this. Of course, we argued against this because they had plenty of opportunities. They knew at least a month in advance that we were going to be bringing in an expert use of force witness. So they bring in this guy, Officer Ryan Rasmussen of the Gresham Police Department. He's now the current use of force and firearms trainer. And he's basically saying that everything I did was wrong, no one's trained to do this, blah, blah, blah. There's one problem with his testimony, though. His only experience with firearms is in military and law enforcement. He went into the Marines, he got out of the Marines, he did some armed security, and then he joined the police force. He has no experience as a civilian. He's not qualified to train civilians. He's never been through civilian-based courses. His testimony could only relate to what police would be able to do in a similar circumstance. One interesting thing is he said police are not trained to pull a gun, point it at someone, and not shoot, and then reholster. So they're kind of vaguely stating that if you're going to pull your gun, you have to shoot. And as I explained, the threat was neutralized just by the act of drawing. And so his statements there I find interesting because I personally have seen police officers draw their firearms on people, issue verbal commands, the person complies with the commands. For example, a guy has a knife out, police draw their guns, drop the knife, the guy drops the knife, threat's alleviated, gets his hands up, police reholster their gun. I personally have seen things like that. I know Bob's seen, you guys have all probably seen things like that. The cop watcher contingent here. So he's saying that police officers are not trained to do that. So if you see anybody out there, if you see an officer pulling a gun on someone, not shooting and reholstering, get in contact with the person they drew the firearm on. Get them in touch with attorney Sean Riddell, because I think that's a lawsuit right there. Because you have this guy on the witness stand saying police aren't trained to do that. That's a crime, if it's me doing it. Shouldn't it be the same thing with police? Another interesting thing about Ryan Rasmussen is he's saying his police department does not use use of force continuum charts and wheels and things like that. There's numerous ones that are in firearms training, use of force training. He's saying that they don't use those. But what's interesting is that we obtained testimony that he had previously given, just a year prior, stating that his department does in fact use such wheels and charts. So now we have him lying to the judge on the witness stand, just as Kate Molina and Todd Jackson have lied to people, just like Benjamin Carenza's on the stand lying, just like John Slaughter's on the stand lying. We've now caught a police officer lying to Judge Thomas Ryan on the stand. So Rasmussen himself, I think, has bad judgment because he allowed a mob of people to attack him on a Max platform one time. So it came time for the verdict. And throughout the verdict and the sentencing, the judge said some interesting things. He said, this is not about what other, something to the effect of, this is not about what other people were doing, this is what Strickland did. To me, that indicates that the judge refused to take into consideration self-defense. Because self-defense is entirely predicated on the actions of what somebody else is doing. By him saying it's not about those actions, he's saying that he refused to consider self-defense. He said things to the effect of, you had other options. I've exercised a lot of those options. No one's explained to me what I should have done. People who disagree with me, no one's explained what someone should do in that particular situation. I'll welcome that under the question and A period. Not right now, during the Q&A, thank you.
I was just wondering, what do you think the police agenda is?
I don't know. I can't speculate to that. Maybe I'll get into that a little later on.
Do you feel like they failed it?
I don't know. It's a complicated situation. I'll put it that way. But so no one's explained what someone should do in that situation. The only people who have explained are people who agree with what I did. Say that what I did was perfectly right and reasonable. That includes professional firearms trainers, current and former law enforcement officers, military people. They all agree with what I did, completely in line with how someone should act in that particular situation. Another interesting thing is there is no duty to retreat. You know, there were a lot of these vague references to a clear path of escape. I was going down the clear path of escape. I'm not going to turn my back to these people and try to outrun them. I'm weighed down, I've had knee trouble, I have my gear with me, I'm not going to try to outrun them. So that was actually ruled in State versus Sandoval, the state Supreme Court, just like in the Kenneth Wood case, ruled that there is no duty to retreat in order to exercise self-defense. This is further solidified by a recent case here in Multnomah County. You guys may have seen this in the news a few months ago. There was a FedEx driver who was driving, he was black, driving on his truck route. Someone started screaming at him from the side of the street, some racist comments of some sort. He decides to get out of his truck. And I don't know all the details. I'm not necessarily ragging on anyone in this particular case. I don't know exactly what happened. So he gets out of his truck, goes and confronts the person. The person is throwing a water bottle or something. He punches the guy, knocks him out, kills him. That was ruled to be self-defense by the same Multnomah County District Attorney's Office. And in fact, in their press release, they say there's no duty to retreat. So the judge also said, you know, he said this was an unlawful escalation. If what I did is an unlawful escalation, then by default, he's saying that the actions of the mob were a lawful escalation. And that's the scary part. You know, during pretrial arguments, he referred to numerous hypotheticals involving a counter-protester. Again, I wasn't there to counter-protest. He said during the sentencing, when I gave my short statement that I believed that I was about to be, beaten and robbed, smashed on the pavement, he said, "You are not about to be pummeled. You cannot react in the way that you did." I want to know where his interdimensional time machine is. How can he say that without being able to go back in time and observe a different reality where I didn't pull the gun? I don't have that luxury. Apparently the judge does. What's interesting is the judge is sort of inserting his own mindset as if it were mine. My appeals attorney is particularly citing this for things that we can bring up for other legal maneuvers. So they're saying that there are 10 victims involved in this for each person who was in the immediate peripheral. Only 2 of them ever came forward. Carenza and Chaddock. Carenza, the guy who started the thing. Chaddock, the other guy circling around me, now coming up on my 4 or 5 o'clock position. Those are the only 2 people who ever came forward. None of the other people were even identified. We didn't even know their names. They had masks over their faces, and or they didn't want to come forward. They could very well have had warrants out for them. Maybe they knew they were the ones committing crimes on that day. And they didn't want to come forward because of that.
11 if you count Sawyer.
So I have a constitutional right to face my accusers. I was denied that right. So the judge had issued his verdict, guilty on all counts. And you could hear the air getting sucked out of that room. In fact, there's 2 people in this room, maybe 3 people, I think, who were at that when the verdict was announced. Everyone was in shock about this. Because clearly this is a prime example of self-defense against mob violence here. So by finding me guilty, the judge has ruled that a person does not have the right to freedom of the press. You do not have the right to be in a public area, filming a public event, exercising your freedom of the press. Instead, a mob of thugs with masks over their faces and sticks in hand have the legal right and lawful authority to use physical force and intimidation tactics to prevent you from doing that. I know there's a lot of journalists in the room. That should scare the bejesus out of you right there. Whether you're a mainstream journalist, whether you're an independent journalist, guerrilla journalist, it's a very scary notion right there. It's perfectly legal for them to do that to you. It's a crime if you try to stop them from harming you. And this extends to other things too. Freedom of the press is a constitutional right. Standing on the street, doing nothing isn't necessarily a constitutional right. So I have even more clout to be there doing what I was doing than someone standing in the street. There's been a lot of talk of attacks on people lately, especially with the political violence that's gone on downtown. That was essentially legalized in my case. The judge has ruled that mob violence is legal. So in an effort to try to lambast me, they've inadvertently given carte blanche to the KKK to attack black folks on the street. Because they have masks over their faces. They could have weapons in hand. They're free to do that. If the black person they're targeting tries to defend themselves, that's the person who's guilty of crimes. That's the unintended consequence from everybody who is piling on with me in this case. And even scarier, this extends further. So according to the judge, DAs, and police, if you did this to them, they would not consider it to be unlawful physical force. If you see a police officer walking down the street, according to the judges and DAs, you have the right to do to them what the mob did to me. This extends to activists, probation officers, journalists, the governor. She doesn't have special privileges over the rest of us. Now, this is not a case. I was convicted of 21 counts. 10 felonies of unlawful use of a weapon, 10 misdemeanors of menacing, 1 misdemeanor of disorderly conduct. Now, I understand most of these cases. I'm sure you could vouch for it. Most of these cases involve someone who's robbing the liquor store, someone who's trying to carjack someone, a drug deal gone bad. This is completely different than a lot of those other cases. What was going through my head was not, I'm going to go and commit a crime. It was, these guys mean business. They're about to pummel and rob me. There's no police around. Many of them have masks over their faces. They'll never be identified. There's no consequences for them if they beat me and rob me. There's no consequences for them if they beat me and rob me. If I do not act right now to defend myself, I'm toast. I'm flattened into the pavement. So I was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 40 days in jail, and 240 hours of community service. Now the jail days were to be served on weekends, which isn't even real jail. Yeah, it's still cumbersome. It's a big inconvenience for me. I missed out on a lot of work. Weekend jail, you show up to the courthouse, not even the jail, but the Multnomah County Courthouse. And they lead you up to the room on top. If you've ever been in there in the jail scrubs, then it's the room where you're waiting for your court appearances. And you basically sit in there all day and watch movies with 20 or 30 other guys. They bring you 2 crappy bologna lunches. And then you go home for the night. You sleep in your own bed, you get to check your email, you get to eat a real meal. Then on Sunday you come back and do it again. Now I had 12 days credit served already, plus 4 days of good behavior, so that was a balance of 24 days that I did on that throughout the summer of 2017. Originally, the original sentencing, he changed it a little bit from what the pretrial release officer had done. The judge initially ruled that I could not film any person as my special conditions, in addition to the normal things that when someone's on probation. So 5 weeks later, we were able to get some of that lifted. I still have a lot of First Amendment restrictions. I am banned from filming protests. I am banned from filming anything at PSU. I can't film my own speech right now. If I film my own speech, I go to prison. You know, there's a lot of this rhetoric about Trump's attacks on the media. Has Trump ever threatened to throw someone into prison for engaging in their First Amendment rights? I'm experiencing that right now. It's not Trump threatening that. It's the judges in Multnomah County that are threatening that. But I'm not banned from going to political events, which I think is interesting, because if the judge is ordering that as a way to protect the public, because he doesn't want the incident to happen again, doesn't want a redo of everything, then why aren't I banned from going to political events in the first place? Because if it was my intention to do that, having a camera or not wouldn't matter. In fact, if it was my intention to do that, why would I bother following that order in the first place? Yeah. So while I was in weekend jail, I was actually denied some deferrals to work. I had been offered some weekend work. I do a lot of freelance work, video production stuff. I've been offered some work throughout that summer, and I heard some other guys doing weekend jail who were able to get permission to defer some of those days, where they can go to work, and then the days that they miss just get added on at the end of their thing here. I was denied that. You have these other guys who are approved to do that. There were other guys in there who weren't even asking for permission to take a weekend off. They just weren't showing up. One guy wanted to go rafting on the river with his buddies because the weather was nice out. Another guy, he was scared. He was a younger guy. He didn't know what was going to happen, so he just didn't show up because he was scared. He actually tried to turn himself in at the normal jail later that week. They didn't take him. There's a warrant out for him. They didn't want him. So he showed up for his normal weekend jail. No consequences, no extra time, no fines, no new charges for that. But I'm denied that for legitimate work reasons. So if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And that's where I really get concerned for the general public at large. You know, about the attacks on LGBT folks. I know you were bringing some of that up, and some other folks were. You know, they don't have the right to try to stop someone from beating them. If they do, they're the ones who go to prison. I don't care if you're black, I don't care if you're Asian, Islander, Native, transgender, non-binary, gay, straight. Everybody should have the right to defend themselves against that sort of thing. I don't care who the aggressors are, whether it's Antifa, whether it's the KKK, whether it's just some street gang wanting to cause trouble, whether it's some guys who need money for their fix, they're sort of trying to rob you. This affects everybody to the core. So we are now in the appeals process. My attorney on the appeal is Robert Barnes. He's an attorney to the stars of sorts out of LA. He's representing some of the Covington kids, actually. He's not the one I had on the trial. That's a talk for a different day. So in the appeals process, you're not necessarily going back And I wish Sergeant Halliburton were here to show the video. You're not necessarily going back and re-arguing the case. You're not going back and looking back over evidence or arguing innocence or guilt. You're addressing errors that were made on the trial level by the judge. Now, most of these cases that I've seen as I've investigated these involve one assignment of error, as I call it. My case involves 6.
Only.
We're limited to 10,000 words. It would have been probably a dozen if it wasn't for the word limit. So the things we've raised on the appeal, several of them center around my state of mind. Again, the judge denied all those motions that relate to my mindset and what I was thinking at the time. And because of the case law precedent set in Oliphant and Wood, self-defense is purely in the state of mind of the person who's raising self-defense. So, change of venue is our first one for assignment of error. What happened to my arm and the fact that that was ruled inadmissible, which certainly plays into my mindset. That's one of our things. The definitions of unlawful use of a weapon that the state refused to clarify, because in our point of view, that left me with an impossible defense because I didn't know what I was defending myself against. The statements to the detectives, the ambush witness, we argued is an error because there actually are not only laws involving that regarding proper procedures, but also case law. State v. Flygare is a state law involving that where they can't present ambush witnesses. And the First Amendment restrictions. So those are our 6 assignments of error. Now the appeals court relies on typed out transcription of everything. We're not going back and listening to the audio. I have the audio from the whole thing. Someone has to type it all out. They have to listen to the audio and type it all out. So that was ordered right away in May, I think, maybe June of 17. The trial was February of 2017. The sentencing was May 3rd of 2017. So we filed our appeal in timely manner later in May. The transcriptions were ordered, and it took them 4 months to get us the transcripts. My appeals attorneys say they've never seen anything like that take so long. We filed everything in a timely manner. They're allowed to take all that long. They're allowed to continually ask for extensions. So we finally get the transcription, and we put together our written brief, and we submit that in a timely manner, which was then, so we got the transcriptions in October of 17, and we got our written brief in mid-December, I think, which then puts the state on the clock for 45 days to submit their response to our motion. So that puts them out to late January. And then I'm told in late January that the state, person handling the state here, Susan G. Howe, has now filed a 131-day extension of time for her to put together her response. She writes in her motion that I agreed to it. That she spoke with the appellate attorneys, that she spoke with the appellant, me, and that we agreed to that. My attorneys were never contacted about that. So the Judge Egan, on the appeals court, he takes that at face value. I'm not bagging on Egan because all he had was what was written in the motion there. So he signs off on the 131-day extension. Meanwhile, my life's hanging in limbo through all of this. So that puts it out to June at some point. So she finally submits her thing, along with the motion to exceed the word limit by 2,000 words. We kept ours at 10,000 words. She needs 12,000 words to retort the arguments we were making. Judge approves it. So we're noticing now that they're playing a little fast and loose with the rules, which I don't necessarily have a problem with as long as they're fair about it. So then we submitted a motion to submit an additional 2,000 words. So we would have the same number of words, which the judges allowed. That gave us an opportunity to retort some of the things that Susan G. Howe was saying. In Susan G. Howe's response here, she's claiming that it was Carenza and 3 of his associates. There were a lot more than 3 people there. What she's trying to do is minimize the danger that I felt by claiming there were fewer people there. It's all on video. How can you miss this? She's either blind or incompetent.
It's all subjective.
She's either blind or incompetent, or she's intentionally lying.
Dishonest.
Or she's intentionally lying. But what she's trying to do is minimize the fear that I felt, and minimize the actions of Carenza. Because again, riot is if you're doing that with 5 or more people. By claiming there were 3 people, she's then by minimizing what Carenza was doing. She even admitted in there that Carenza posed a threat to me. Carenza and 3 other people posed a threat to me. She's saying other than Carenza and his 3 associates, no one else posed a threat to him. So she's saying right there, Carenza posed a direct threat to me. Even Ryan Rasmussen, the ambush witness, he even concluded on the witness stand that Carenza and the dude shedding his backpack were direct threats to me, and that I was justified on drawing on that. Even the guy brought in to debunk everything about my case agreed to that. So now we wait. We're waiting on the appeals court. There's no legal limit on their time. They can go as long as they want before they make a decision. They don't ever have to rule. Libertarian Party waited 5 years before they got their ruling, because there's 2 Libertarian parties in the state, and they were both fighting each other in court for who would officially own the Libertarian Party. There was another case filed in December of 2016, over 2 years ago, where a guy, they just recently overturned it, where a guy was found guilty in a trial where he wasn't even at. The defendant wasn't there and his attorney wasn't there, and the judge allowed the trial to happen. It took the appeals court over 2 years to rule to reverse that. To rule, yeah, this guy had a right to his trial. You denied him his right. So, you know, I've abided by everything they told me to do, because the last thing I want is trouble with them. And now we just wait. You know, meanwhile my life is in limbo. My whole life is turned upside down. You know, I pay all these fees. I'm now branded with all this stuff while I continue to fight this. You know, I lost my apartment, had to give up a bunch of my belongings. And it's not fair. There's 80 DAs, hundreds of people in state DOJ, thousands of police, thousands of activists, powerful media. It's not fair for them. They're going to need a hell of a lot more than that. They want to take me down. And I am prepared to take this as far as I need to take it, to whatever court I need to take it, for however long I need to do this, until it's overturned at whatever point it needs to be overturned at. The civil rights of everybody is at stake. My life is at stake. The rights of journalists are at stake. The rights of the community are at stake. What's interesting here is the officer that had me in custody for most of the night of the altercation here. I'd actually seen him at a previous event a couple years prior. It was a town hall for Ginny Burdick, the state senator, another person that I love to film and post videos about. Now, she refuses to take open questions at her town halls. You have to do little written questions, and they pick and choose which ones they're going to answer. So the only way to actually ask her something is after the event. And so I start asking her questions at the event as she's starting to leave. Now, she's got 5 police officers surrounding her. She's calling for all these gun restrictions, saying introducing a gun to a situation makes it more volatile. Yet she hires, on our dime, 5 plainclothes Portland police officers to be at this town hall with her. So I'm asking her these questions, and she doesn't want to answer them, of course, because they're tough questions about the actual policies and bills that she's supporting and introducing. So I'm asking her the questions, and eventually this police officer turns to me and goes, okay, you've had enough. If you keep doing this, it's going to be harassment. That's the same officer who had me in custody on the evening of this, who I was trying to explain to what had happened, and who I was trying to get to watch the videos. So I'm leaving his name out for very strategic reasons. According to the Portland Police, asking a publicly elected official questions at a public event, at a public venue where the public is invited, that's harassment. But if instead I were to see Ginny Burdick in a public area, and I gathered up a gang of masked thugs, and we had sticks in our hand, and we decided to encircle her from behind, and we started pushing and shoving her, shouting obscenities at her, demanding that she leave a public area, according to the Portland police, perfectly acceptable behavior. Again, when I say that the public is at risk, that's what I mean. Everybody's at risk. You know, I'll compare this. Let's say there's a black dude who works for the Parks Department. And let's say he gets assigned a park in a racist neighborhood. You know, there's a lot of talk of white supremacists in the Pacific Northwest. Let's say he gets assigned to work at a park there. Let's say the people in the neighborhood don't like him because he's black or for whatever reason. So they see him there doing his job, like I was doing my job, and they don't like him. Let's say they file a police report saying, oh yeah, we saw him out by the school in his van. It looked like he was picking out children to go and molest. Now they can make this police report. They never contact the black dude about it. They can make the police report that says he's a suspected child molester. Just like John Slaughter did to me, saying that I'm a suspected white supremacist and accusing me of all this other racist stuff towards him. These other people can do the same thing. So let's say a mob of literally KKK guys decide they don't like the black dude working in the park. So they're going to put their hoods on, just like these guys put their masks on. They're going to go and visit, they're going to plan their thing. There's security cameras at the park that capture it all. And they're going to go and do to the black parks worker exactly what the mob did to me. And the black parks worker tries to get away. He's trying to get away from them. They've surrounded him. They're starting to push and shove him, and he's trying to get away. And they're continuing to come after him. Let's say as part of his job that day, he was slinging down bushes and whatnot. He has a machete with him. So he pulls his machete out on the KKK guys to get them to back off. Now it's the black dude. If you apply the same standard to me, now it's the black dude who faces the charges. And the KKK guys who started the fight, they're considered the innocent victims.
You gotta wrap it up soon.
Okay. So they can do that same thing to that. The NRA has been completely useless. They've been of no help to this. Anybody who's ever asked the NRA for help about me, they, oh no, we're not going to help Strickland, he's a criminal. So if you're an NRA member, or if you have NRA's carry guard, and this happens to you, NRA is not going to be there to help you. Not financially, not PR-wise. They're going to talk smack about you behind your back. Oregon Firearms Federation, they've been the ones helping throughout all of this. Because they're the ones actually on the ground doing things here in Oregon. So at this point, I will try to take questions if we can.
I think we have too little time.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Laughing at Liberals is the name of my YouTube channel. I put up a lot of videos about the case. You can go back and watch all of this stuff. Lots of raw videos. I put up lots of audio parts of the shenanigans that have gone on, the lies that have been told, proven to be lies, things that the district attorneys have said. Benjamin Carenza's lengthy criminal history.
Is your YouTube channel still up?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just not very active because I'm banned from filming political events.
Question,
Yes.
two questions. One, can you go for federal suit for civil rights movement?
We do intend on that. The first step towards that, from what I gather, is getting it overturned at the appeals level.
And the next question is, how do you get 10 indictments? Is it indictments?
Right, yeah.
Out of 4.
Yeah.
According to 4, I mean your math. Wait. You have 4 people, but you got 10 here.
They're claiming there's 10 people in the immediate.
No, but the appeal process, they said there's only.
Oh, right.
One,
Yeah.
but 4 is a sentencing. Where they were like, they wanted to, as far as like, allow me to have contact.